Overpaying for anything sucks, especially socks, so why pay $45 for a single pair of grip socks when you can spend less than half? Pure Grip Socks Pro feature our best materials for optimal fit, moisture wicking, and performance at a fair price, just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
A question you might ask your friend, but also a brand of football boots that once upon a time used to be a lot more popular. Umbro is back with a brand new model, and I have to say, it's probably their best one in the last 5 or 6 years. Ladies and gentlemen, the Umbro Tocco 2 Pro. Nearly a complete redesign coming from the original Tocco, a football boot that I was not a big fan of. It carries over the same sole plate and stud pattern made from Peebacks and introduces an all-new design to the upper, which features a combination of kangaroo leather with micro texturing as well as D300 foam as a control cushion element. There's also some knitted components to the football boots, and overall, it's a very impressive product. The only downside being the price tag, and that these retail for $250. Given the lack of popularity around the double diamonds, I really question how many people are going to be willing to pay that much for these, even if they're really good. And that really is the big question that needs to be answered. Of course, we're going to cover the details of how these fit, feel, and perform, but at the end of the day, is the Tocco 2 Pro worth the $250 over the much more popular alternative in the Nike Tiempo Legend 9 Elite that retails for $230? Should you buy this instead of this? Would you buy this instead of this? I'm going to do my best to answer all those questions and more, so stick around for more details, including how they fit and feel on feet. And if you are by chance interested in a pair of Tocco 2 Pros for yourself, availability at this point in time isn't very good, but what is available will be linked on the review page of my website, which you can access by clicking the first link down below. Also, if you guys enjoy these reviews of the less popular brands, don't forget to support this one with a like, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel along with hitting that bell notification so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2022. Now, normally when a new model comes out, I like to compare it to the one it replaces. In this situation, that would be the original Umbro Tocco, which I thought was such an awkward fitting and feeling pair of football boots. I think it'd be in everyone's best interest to just forget about them entirely, because what they've done here with the Tocco 2 Pro is better in every single way. Even the sole plate that somehow managed to feel awkward on the original, even though it's exactly the same this time around, it just feels so much better because of the changes they've made to the upper, which still follows the same basic concept of being kangaroo leather the majority of the way through, but then with a textile and knitted component kind of through the midfoot and heel area. Now, I think what's really unique about this football boot is the quality of the kangaroo leather, which I think is top notch, but more importantly, the micro texturing that you have on the surface. It almost looks like it's perforated. I can assure you that it's not. You can see the little leather stamping right there, and the leather spans the entirety of the forefoot and toe box area and then stretches pretty far back here on the medial side. So the amount of leather, I would say, is pretty decent. The thickness of the leather is relatively normal. I would say it's on the more padded side in terms of what you're gonna find from a lot of leather boots out there, but it's super soft and provides a nice touch on the ball. It is not overloaded with memory foam, or in this case, D300 foam, like we saw on the original Tocco. So from a touch perspective, it's much more natural, but I think what's really cool about the texturing on the surface in particular is it provides a surprising amount of additional grip. Typically, a football boot with a plain kangaroo leather upper has kind of a slick finish. This provides similar grip to something like a rubber striking element without that stickiness. Something that really surprised me about these boots, it took a little bit of getting used to, but honestly, if you want that feel and softness of leather with a little bit of additional grip, this does that better than anything else without any additional elements. Probably one of the most effective micro texturings I've ever experienced on a pair of football boots. In addition to the kangaroo leather, you can see here on the medial side of the foot, there is a D300 insert, which D300, based on my understanding, is just like their normal material, but made using all recycled materials, hence the zero element to the name. For those unfamiliar with D3O, it's a type of foam that's really good at impact absorption, soft and comfortable when it's just kind of being squished like this, but when a really harsh impact comes, it hardens up really nicely. As far as an application is concerned on a pair of football boots, because it's typically used in a lot of sports equipment for protective reasons, it does a really nice job of providing a dampening effect on the ball while still being relatively thin and without feeling overly bulky on your foot. It's a super noticeable element, and in my opinion, again, one of the better implementations of a quote-unquote memory foam that we've seen on a pair of football boots in quite a long time. As for the rest of the upper, it's relatively unspectacular but decent. It's a textile material, so basically a mesh with a fuse overlay that's relatively thin but provides decent structure and still has good flexibility to it. And then across the top of the foot, you're going to find that there is a knitted one-piece enclosure while still maintaining a standard central lacing system with a single lace hole construction that runs into this mock collar. And then at the very back, with its low-cut design, you're going to find an internal plastic heel counter that's definitely on the softer side and a shaping that seems very straight up and down. I wasn't in love with the fit in the heel. It's slightly on the shallower side, and in general, it doesn't have a lot of padding. You feel like you're kind of pressed up against it and there's nothing really grabbing your heel and holding it in place. Not to the point where I experienced any issues with slippage, but I didn't think that the comfort through the heel was nearly as good as some other high-end options, certainly in the leather football boot category. Nonetheless, the materials used are quite nice in that it's this really soft kind of synthetic suede microfiber, really nice in terms of gripping your socks despite the lack of padding there. Then the insole, fully removable. I'll give you guys a quick look at that. Has this really cool pattern on the surface. A little bit of a slippery finish with this mesh that they've chosen to go for that I think was necessary in order to have this really cool printed on pattern. So maybe not the best choice there, but the foam itself is really high quality, good thickness to it, and honestly feels really good underfoot. As for the sole plate and stud pattern, it might look relatively traditional, but I would say it's pretty unique in terms of feel in that it's a lot more structured and I don't want to say stiff, but it's got a firmer feel in terms of how it flexes than I think what a lot of people would expect. They do specify that P-backs is utilized, but they don't mention where, so I'm not sure if it's the entire thing, if it's the white part, if it's the navy blue part as kind of a structure element. Nonetheless, it does feel on the firmer side and does take a little bit of breaking in and getting used to, but for those that like that firmer, I guess more substantial feel to the sole plate, I think you're really going to enjoy this. And in general, I didn't really have too many issues with it. It didn't feel awkwardly stiff or anything like that, which you can often get with a stiffer sole plate construction. And then as far as the FG stud pattern is concerned, they are all conical studs, fairly traditional in terms of layout, similar to Adidas, honestly. 4 studs in the heel, 6 studs along the outside of the forefoot, 1 support stud in the middle, and then a very Nike-esque bladed stud here at the tip of the toe. One thing that I did find a little bit unusual is how angled these front studs are. They're just not straight up and down. There's really no other way to put it, and I'm not sure that's coming through in the video. It's not something that I noticed when playing in the boots either, but it is something that is visually a little bit strange. Nonetheless, the traction from this FG stud pattern felt pretty good, and if anything, the studs are a little bit on the shorter side compared to most FG stud patterns out there, so if you do play on slightly harder ground, you might find that this will work out a little bit better than most of the other options out there. As for the weight, I thought it'd be interesting to compare the Tocco 2 Pro to another football boot with a micro-textured kangaroo leather upper with foam inserts and a conical stud pattern in the Tiempo Legend 9 Elite, which also happens to be $20 less expensive. We'll start off with the Umbros, and you can see on the scale in a 9.5 US, they weigh in at 8.4 ounces, the equivalent of 238 grams, which is by no means heavy, but it's not spectacularly lightweight for a top-end pair of football boots in 2022. Throw on the Legend 9 Elite, and you can see that they weigh in at 7.5 ounces, the equivalent of 212 grams, a full ounce weight difference between the two, which I would say is significant in that the Tiempos do feel lighter both in hand as well as on feet, but I don't necessarily think it's reason enough to 100% decide that this is the better option purely based on weight. Now, I haven't mentioned this up until this point in the video, and truthfully, it doesn't really matter when you're talking about performance, but I happen to really like the look of these boots, especially on feet. They have a nice shape to them, and in general, I think the incorporation of the Umbro logo actually looks quite good without going over the top. As far as the fit and feel is concerned, however, The leather is super soft. I like the way that they've incorporated the knitted element, especially across the top of your foot. It seems like it wraps your foot very closely. My only gripe, like I mentioned earlier in the video, is the heel, which feels very straight up and down in terms of how it's shaped, and not to the point where it's necessarily uncomfortable. I definitely think there's some getting used to, and when you're breaking them in, you should take your time because there is potential for blisters, but I just feel like the way that they've designed this makes for more pressure on the heel than what I'd personally experience from most other football boots, which again, not necessarily a major negative, but not really my cup of tea, or at least room for improvement, perhaps for a Tocco 3. As far as the width is concerned, they have a snug fit, but also have decent width to them. They're a little bit more snug through the toe box area out of the box, but of course, being that they are kangaroo leather, it is going to stretch a significant amount. I was also a little bit worried about this seam right here in the leather. I typically don't like to see that, but honestly, you don't feel it whatsoever when the boots are on feet, so no complaints there. As far as overall width is concerned, as long as your feet aren't extremely wide, I think these will work for most people. They're also remarkably easy to get on, given that they do have a one-piece enclosure. And then as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you're looking to order a pair for yourself, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, the Umbro Tocco 2 Pro is a gigantic improvement over the model it replaces, and it's probably the first Umbro football boot in a very long time that I would be happy to wear. It has some issues with the fit in the heel, at least based on my own personal preferences, but I love what they've done with the kangaroo leather, as well as the implementation of D300, and the boots as a whole have that nice solid feel. Here's the thing. At $250, assuming you're paying full retail for a pair, would I be picking these over a pair of Tiempos? The answer to that question is simply no. As good as these are, and as much as I think they're a step in the right direction for the Umbro brand, I just can't say that they fit as well, that they feel as comfortable, or that they really just, in general, perform to the same standard as the Tiempos. That's not to say that you'll play worse in a pair of Umbros versus a pair of Nike Tiempos, but again, given the choice and the $20 price difference in favor of the Nikes, this is the one that I would pick out of the two. But again, well done to Umbro for making something that is legitimately very good. It's just too expensive.